Welcome to episode 3 of No Time to Cry. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Laura.
And today's episode is all about me.
It is indeed.
Well, me and Dad. So, yeah, well, obviously, you would have heard Laura's episode from last week. Same format, essentially. Like we said last time, we just wanted to make sure, didn't we, that there was an episode dedicated to both of our parents and their story, because not only does it feel right to do that, but it just helps you guys understand a bit more about us and allow you to ask questions about maybe specifics if they're similar stories.
Absolutely. And they're quite different stories as well. So we wanted to make sure that we were super open and transparent about what we both have been through and the stories of our parents. Like Shan said, it's really important for you to sort of know who they were to a point anyway. And hopefully you can resonate with some of it and it's relatable for some of you who are going through this, and fingers crossed it's comforting to know that you're not on your own.
Yeah, definitely. And similar to Laura's last week, I wanted to give a trigger warning because mine even more so, but I think can it makes people feel uncomfortable in general anyway. But essentially there'll be topics of suicide, substance abuse, alcoholism, mental health. All of these topics will be mentioned and discussed today, as well as Laura said last week, just sudden death in general, which could be triggering to people. So yeah, just wanted to let you know. And like we said last time, if this feels a little bit too raw for you and you don't want to listen in, no hard feelings. We completely appreciate that, and maybe you can come back to it on another day. But yeah, if you are ready to maybe hear a little bit about my story and what that looks like, then I'm hoping it comes across the way I want it to.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Shan. And yeah, before we jump in, I just wanted to share a few words about Shannon as well. Yeah, what a fantastic human. And wow, she's one of the strongest people that I know in so many ways. And she's super, super resilient and just an absolutely amazing friend. And it broke my heart to see you go through what you did with your dad, and you inspire me in so many different ways in terms of how you got through it. And yeah, I think it'll come across today just how passionate you are about making sure the people have a safe place to understand some of this stuff more, and for you to get support as well if you're in a similar situation to what Shan is, because it's really, really hard. I think a lot of you will get something out of Shan and her dad John's story. So yeah, let's jump in. Right, Shan. So I think probably the best place to start would be for you to maybe describe your dad and let the listeners know a little bit more about John.
I mean, if you've met him, you won't forget him. Let's put it that way. Yeah, he's. Do you know what? It's funny. I was talking about him then, still in present tense, which is, I think, something that probably both of us do, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well. But yeah, he was fucking mental. It's the best way to put it. He was just indescribable in so many ways, and I think that's because he had so many different sides to him. Um, from the outside in, he was this big, tattooed, piercings, like at times intimidating character. And it was so interesting for me throughout my life to watch people kind of look at him and then by the time they'd interacted with him have a complete different opinion, because the outside didn't always project how sensitive and just I think he was the kind of character that was all or nothing. Nothing was ever done by halves in every way. Um and just yeah, we had so many and I know you touched on this with your mum, Lord. When somebody passes away, obviously there's a great amount of sadness, but it does actually allow you an insight as to what impact they had on others. And I know myself and Demi, we had so many messages about the impact that my dad had on so many people's lives throughout the history. And the amount of stories there is with my dad, you think he was about 150 and he was in his early 50s. But um, yeah, he was just this kind of emotional, sensitive, happy character that unfortunately there was another side to him where there was also a deep amount of sadness and struggle. And it wouldn't be right for me to talk about him and not touch on the struggles that he did have, because he was very open about it. You know, if you followed him on Facebook, you would have seen you would have seen that he constantly spoke about mental health and his journey with that. And people would have seen the good days of my dad and the bad days. And there was quite a few of those bad days, specifically more towards the end of his life. But in general, yeah, he just brought, there was like an angst about him. I suppose it's quite difficult to describe his character because there was almost like an intensity about him. You never quite knew what you were going to get. And I know that seems mad, but that's the only way I can describe him because he was like a roller coaster. Yeah, you never quite knew what side that you would get, but it was quite thrilling to some degree. Also hard as a child in his life, you know. He's so difficult just to describe, and I'm sure that anybody that knew him would say that because just so much joy about him and the care that he had towards animals and people. I have definitely embodied that, and there's so many of his characteristics that I see in myself in terms of us just being passionate and having certain a certain amount of creativity about us. There's certain elements of him that I go, God, yeah, I am very similar to my dad. And there's other parts where I go, wow, we couldn't be any further apart. I mean, we look remarkably similar.
Carbon copy.
Which was always a joy, you know, to be told that you look like a man, but there you go. He's so hard to describe him, but
I think you've encapsulated that well. Like
yeah.
he's just there aren't the words, are
No,
there?
I think that's it. I struggle to describe it because he's someone that you just had to meet. Like
Yeah.
that's the only way that you can say. And who's my fiance, used to say like your dad's just
Something else.
yeah, but in a positive. And listen, like I'll go into a bit more detail around some of the harder times with dad, but in general, his highs were high, and you know like I said, he didn't do anything by half. So that the highs were good and the lows were fucking pit low, you know?
Live life in the fast lane, didn't
Hun-
he?
100%. And he took us with him. Like that's the only way that I would describe it. But yeah, hopefully that gives a bit about him. But plenty of nicknames. John Tat was a big one because obviously he's covered in tattoos. John Tanga, I don't even want to know where that one came from. Just said, yeah, everybody has a story about my dad, and some of them are mental, and some of them are really sort of heartwarming. So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I really wish I could have met him because he was clearly larger than life, wasn't he?
yeah,
Definitely. But Shan, this is the harder one to cover. But can you tell the listeners what happened to Dad and when as well?
yeah, of course. So again, just to kind of preempt this bit, it's probably a bit harder to listen to, perhaps if you find the topics of suicide a little bit more sensitive. But unfortunately, my dad took his own life. He really struggled with his mental health. He was diagnosed with, they used to kind of flip between, I don't think they ever really knew what was quite going on in his head, as all of us, I suppose, would have loved to have loved to have known, but between bipolar and personality disorder. And because he had um, alcohol and substance issues as well, um, obviously if they give you medication to support with that and you're drinking or taking substances on them, they don't work as well. So he just had a real up and down journey with his mental health. And unfortunately, it reached a point for my dad where he decided that being here was too hard for him. Gosh, I'm already feeling my eyes go. So yeah, it'll be 2 years in 23rd of January. And I was at home. I was off work, which I'm really glad about. Weirdly, how things fall. I'd been in Dublin that weekend with one of my other best friends, Paula, and I'd flown back on the Sunday. And Monday was the anniversary of mine and my partner, and we'd booked it off to do something, especially because I'd been away for the weekend. And he'd gone out to sort of do some quotes for work or something like that before we were going to spend the day. And I remember sort of being laid in bed, and I saw my Auntie Sue, who was my dad's sister-in-law, call me. Whenever my Auntie Sue would call me, it would normally be along the lines, don't get me wrong, she does check in on me all the time, but something usually would have maybe popped up with my dad. Maybe he was in hospital, or might have even been sectioned or something like that. It wasn't abnormal for me to receive a call about him. So when I saw it, I thought, oh, I bet that's about dad. So, I answered the phone. She said to me, can you talk? I think she was checking if I was at work because it was a Monday. And I said, yeah, what's wrong? And she started to obviously tell me that it was about my dad and something had happened to him. I won't, I'll kind of not go into detail of how he did end his life, more for you guys than anybody else. But she was talking about it, and I don't think she used the words initially, your dad's died. I think she was probably being quite gentle with me and trying to just explain what had happened. But she probably was indicating towards it, but my brain just couldn't grasp that could have happened. So I was, she was talking and saying, yeah, this has happened to your dad. Um, he was in his brother's workshop, and two of his colleagues have come in, and I said, right, well, so what's happened? Where is he? Is he in hospital or what? And she was like, no, Shannon, he's dead. And I just remember that it was almost like someone just winded me, and I was like, what?
You can't comprehend it, can
No, I just like I say, I think I always anticipated it, that kind of, there was always a chance that maybe my dad might, have liver failure or a heart attack or something, because he did live, the lifestyle that he did with alcohol. And I just never anticipated, even though he did have his struggles with mental health, I would get that phone call. I suppose it was the cries for help previously. I don't think I ever thought he would get to a point where he really didn't want to be here. And yeah, I just remember speaking to her and trying to grasp what had happened. And she said to me, do you want me to speak to Demi for you? And I said, please, because Demi's my sister. I can't call her. I can't call and say to Demi, Dad's died and this is what's happened. It would just fucking break me to do that, and I can't. And I'm so grateful for my Auntie Sue doing that for me, because I just think there's another level of having to tell,
take a second, check.
having to tell the people that you love that something like that's happened. It's really hard. And me and my sister and, my Auntie Sue did have to call round his other friends and family members. My dad was going through a divorce, so he didn't have a partner to kind of deal with those things. So it did fall to us. And just, I think everybody, it was just a shock. And he had loads of friends. He made connections wherever he went. He was a real spiritual person. It's so funny because if you met him when he was young, you would never have said that. But as he got older, he went to rehab and was clean and sober for like 7 years. During that time, he really did get in touch with like his spiritual side. And I laugh about it because you think, how spiritual can you get? But he loved his crystals, he loved meditation, he was a Reiki master. Um he tried to do it on me once. He was like, "You can't accept it. You won't accept it from me."
He passed some of that on to you though, didn't he? Especially like
Yeah.
the crystals, and that's something
Yeah.
special that you shared, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I my view of the crystals are probably in memory of my dad, whereas yeah, he just loved them, and my God, a memory's just popped into my head where he ate a crystal once. I don't know,
As you do.
as you do it. Yeah, there's plenty of these stories that I'm sure will come out, but I think he was always searching for something to bring him peace, and I always love this story of my uncle speaking to one of his best friends, Jimmy, and my uncle said to him, it's just so sad because it felt like John spent his whole entire life searching for that one thing that would eventually bring him peace and joy and solace for obviously the darkness that he had, and he could just never find it. He never found it, and his mate Jimmy went, yeah, but fucking hell, he gave it a good go, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he did, he tried the spiritual side. He tried I think he even went off to help build something in Mexico a couple of years before he passed away. I remember it was just before COVID because I had to help him get a flight home. Yeah, he just, like, it's probably similar to how you describe your mum, Laura. He was an enigma. Like, he just, yeah, and it was really hard to deal with the fact that he wasn't gonna be here anymore, and I suppose that it's such a sensitive topic to talk about suicide and when people get to that point, but I think for me, it's just a great amount of sadness that as much as I would have loved to have been able to, help him, he just, he didn't feel like that was an option for him, so.
Honestly, Shannon, the love that you had for your dad and still have is just formidable. Like, you did everything that you could, everything that you possibly could in your power to try and help him. And I know he loved you so much and would have been so proud of you because you're all the best parts of John. I can see that. And it's heartbreaking, like, for somebody to be in a place where they actually feel like, you're the world's better off without them.
Yeah.
It's just how do you comprehend that? And you did everything you could. You did everything that you possibly could, and more than anybody that I know could have done in that situation. And yeah, you were just incredible, truly.
It's just hard to talk about, I think, because I suppose because when somebody does that, there's so much stigma around it, and the type of person that would do that, and what about their kids, and what about their families, and all those kind of things. And I never felt that. Sorry.
It's okay.
I just felt really sorry for him. I just felt so sad that that's where he was, and that there was like nothing any of us could have done to kind of correct it. And I think I would just, to other people, say like, you can give people like as much support and offer that help, but sometimes it's in someone's destiny that there's part of them that just can't push through it, no matter what, no matter how much people would love them to. They've got to want it for themselves. So
Yes, if your love could have saved him, he would have been here forever, literally. Like, the love that you and Demi had for your dad, like,
Mm.
wow, and yeah, it's so incredibly sad. It really is. And I think it'd be good for the listeners to sort of understand a bit more about your relationship with
Yeah.
your dad as well, Shan.
Yeah, I mean, mine and my dad's relationship was probably quite complex. I think it's difficult to understand for some people. So I've been in therapy for quite a few years now, actually, before dad passed away. So if you've not gauged already, my childhood was a bit mental, even my adult years. So yeah, my dad had, like I said, he had issues with drug and alcohol kind of in my childhood, and um, me and Demi had a wild upbringing in terms of, we would like we were cutting up piece of metal in a workshop at like 7 or 8, like really young. Sorry, mum, I know
Standard
you're not going to
weekend.
want me to probably talk about it, but yeah, it's we were doing stuff like that really young. We had a big part of my dad's life in terms of, there was times where I remember not going to school and going to work with him, um, to make sure that he wasn't drinking and stuff like that, which I know seems mental, but because my dad was so unstable, everybody was just trying everything to be there for him and support him, even as a child, as like 10 or 11 years old. And um, I really feel for my mum, because I think she was just trying to do everything she could to keep the family together. And eventually my dad did go to rehab, and thankfully his brothers kind of helped and supported him with that, and he was clean and sober for 7 years. So right through sort of probably sort of preteen to my teenage years, I had this dad that was someone that I wanted to spend time with, because he was, on that journey of like discovery and working out what was right for him, and was a lot more spiritual. And if anybody's ever been part of sort of AA or CA, he wanted to kind of make up for all the damage that he'd probably caused throughout the years. But yeah, him and my mum separated after he went to rehab, and I used to spend weekends with him, and we would, do stuff together, and Demi would obviously be there as well. And then as Demi got a little bit older, she was 2 years older than me, I would go on my own and spend time with him, and we just built, I suppose, a bit of a bond in the things that we had in common. I suppose there was a lot. We had a very similar taste in music. I give my dad a lot of credit for my taste in music, although some people probably say shit. But he brought so many different levels to me in that, and we'd buy CDs together and listen to music together, and
CDs.
I bloody hell, they were the days. But even, I paint and I draw, and my dad really encouraged that. He absolutely loved that about me, and that creative side. So yeah, we spent tons of time together, just I suppose rebuilding maybe me getting to know my dad, because the dad that I probably knew in my younger years was a different version of him. And that's why I say he's quite hard to describe, because it's like, what era of John are you
Mm.
describing what he was like?
You were making up for, like, lost time as well.
Yeah, 100%. And like, yeah, like I say, we spent really good quality time together. But there was always, I suppose, in the background, I always kind of knew that my dad was still struggling with his mental health, and he would have those kind of ups and downs, but always was quite solid in his sobriety. I mentioned to you before, Law, me and Demi used to go to AA meetings with him and CA meetings, like when we were like 12 or
Top
13.
quality family weekend.
And we'd go to all these, like, I think there was probably people on my Facebook that were mates with my dad that I've met at like CA conventions and AA conventions, where they do like parties and these sort of things. And it had, although I'm sure some people are listening going, fucking hell, that's mental that you'd put your kids around these stories. But I'm so grateful for it,
Mm,
because I think it made me who I am today. It's made me a more compassionate person,
definitely.
and it's made me want to know more about people and make sure that they're okay. And I give complete, you know, thanks to my dad for that, because if he hadn't have put me and Demi in those situations to be able to hear this kind of breadths of how difficult life can be for individuals, I don't think we would be who we are. Um so yeah, that's kind of maybe up until about 18. And then my dad, I remember the phone call so clearly. I was about 18 or 19. I remember being sat on a bus actually in London, and I got this phone call and I was like, "You all right, Dad? You okay?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, just want to talk to you about something." And I thought, okay. And with my dad, you never knew what that was going to be. He might have taken up a new hobby, like, because my dad was probably quite similar to me, where we say, well, I'm all or nothing. Like, if my dad took up a hobby and he was like, right, I'm going to get back into fishing, he would like 5 grand on the best fishing rods, and he hadn't even been yet. So I was like, right, what's this going to be? And he just said to me, I just wanted to let you know that I've started drinking again, but it's all right. I've spoke to a few people, and I'm so different to what I was when I struggled, and I think I can drink socially. And I just remember saying to him, listen, Dad, just be careful. You're an adult. I'm never going to say to you, like, well, I'm not happy about it as your daughter or whatever. Like, if you think you've got control over it, like, that's on you. You've got to do what's right for you, but please just be mindful. I think for about a year, he probably, from what I could see, managed it quite well. And then it just kind of slipped and slipped and slipped. And then eventually, so did his mental health alongside that. Um, and I think anybody that's maybe been around people that have, you know, alcohol issues or substance abuse will kind of see that deterioration. Of that individual. And it was really difficult for me because I think I got a glimpse of what my dad was like when he was, 7 years is quite a long time, especially for somebody that's like 18, 19. It's like half my life at that point. Anyway, I'm a bit older now, but I got to see him well, and then to see somebody kind of slowly slip back, and actually probably further than when he was at his lowest when he went to rehab the first time. It was really, really difficult for me. And as I mentioned, I've been in therapy for kind of probably about 3 years now. Dad and I had our emotions were enmeshed. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that before, like enmeshment, but essentially a lot of my being revolved around him and his emotions. And if he was down, I was there, and I was there with him, and I was sort of in the trenches trying to get him out. And when he was up, I got to breathe easy for a minute. I'm like, he's all right, he's all right. That means I can be all right. That means I don't have to be on edge. And as my dad kind of slipped back into you know, his mental health, being poor, he was in and out of mental health institutes, and I would go down and visit him, bearing in mind I live up north now, so it's like 250, 300 miles away. And I'd regularly kind of go down and keep up to date with him, and we'd speak every day, and constantly offered him the opportunity. Dad, when you're ready, I'm here. I can get you into rehab. I can pay for it. I can afford it. Don't worry, I'm here if you need it. When you're ready, we'll go. And the kind of year before, or year and a half before he passed away, that really hit a dark space in terms of what that looked like. So I became a crutch for him, I suppose. And I'm sure Demi feels the same. We kind of would, at times it would be Demi, and then at other periods it would be me. I think on the couple of years before he passed, it was probably it was my turn, my turn to be there for him. And I really, really struggled. I think it brought up a lot of stuff for me from my childhood, and I just would have done. Sorry. I would have done anything for him to see just what his life could look like if he would just be ready to go back on that journey.
And Shan, you did everything that you could.
I think what's particularly hard for me is, and something I've had to spend a lot of time doing, is because it had reached that point where I was, 4 o'clock in the morning, my dad would call me, work 3, 4 times a day. I'd be on the phone to Dad. And he was asking for help. So I would kind of get those conversations going. He'd say, right, I'm ready to go to rehab. I am ready, Shannon. I'm going to take it seriously. And I'd set all those phone calls up, and then, he'd be blacked out and wouldn't be able to attend them. And I just became a fucking shell of myself trying to help him. I just poured everything I had into that, and I blame like there's no blame towards him whatsoever, because he was ill, he was really, really sick. And unfortunately, I reached a point where I was really, really struggling, and fucking fair play to Jamie, because he was like, I think you need to speak to someone. This is too much for you to deal with on your own. So that's when I got into therapy and kind of started speaking about it. And because we were so enmeshed with our emotions, actually, I needed some space to be able to reconnect with being what a daughter probably should look like in a healthy way, rather than, trying to, I suppose, be a hero for my dad to some degree, and save him. And I'd had to take that space from him, which meant, when he passed away, probably a year later, I wasn't actually talking to him at the time. And that was really hard for me, because naturally, and I think this is not even just specific to suicide, but you question, could I have done more? Should I have just put up with it and had those conversations? Would it have made any difference? If I had been there, would he have done it? Um, and I think it's taken me some time to kind of just process that actually the support was always there if he wanted it. He could have called me that day or messaged me that day and said, Shannon, I mean it this time. I'm ready to go to rehab. And I would have fucking picked my phone up and I would have done it. And I suppose this is the good part of having messages now and living in the day and age that we do, is I've been able to look back at those messages to dad and see that my last message to him is, Dad, I desperately want you in my life. I desperately want you to to have you there, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep, having these conversations again and again and again. I think what's really difficult when somebody is in that state, a lot of the time they don't remember the conversations that you've had. So he didn't recall calling me 3 or 4 times in the early hours of the morning, but I was in the state of mind where I remembered every single word that he was saying or everything that was going on. So yeah, I've kind of had to forgive myself, I suppose, in terms of putting myself first in that situation, knowing that I needed space, but at the same time saying to him, you know, I want you in my life, but that is the dad that's clean and sober. That's the version of you that I need. I can't, we're both going to end up in a really bad place if we don't get a handle on this. And dad, I'm here if you need it, but I can't keep offering it every day, every week. It's breaking me. And I've literally got nothing to give. And unfortunately, he wasn't in a headspace where he was ready to go back on that journey that he'd done, maybe 7 years before. Because I was 26 when dad passed away.
And Shan, like I said earlier, I don't know anyone who could have done more. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I mean that. And even if you weren't able to do more, like there's only so much somebody can give. And Shan, you gave from an empty cup. There was nothing left for you to give, like you said, but you still did everything in your power to help your dad, and he knew it. He knew that was there. And you were broken. You really were. There was no more you could have done. So
And I think that's hard. I'm sure that, like, I'm really aware I'm not the only person that's lost somebody to suicide. And I think there's always that side of it where you go, what could have been done? What could have been said? I think the reality of it is, and this is obviously just my take on it, for some people, they reach a point where I don't think they don't want it, because my dad knew, he's been in rehab before. He knew it worked. He knew that if he had got back into that system and he was ready, that he could have been clean and sober. But for him, I don't think and I'm sure this is kind of where my uncle was getting to, in the fact that, he was never able to find that peace. I think even when he was clean and sober, he was just so riddled in his brain of all these really bad thoughts and bad processes that I think he was looking for something else. And even the week that he died, he'd signed up to some retreat to go to. And it was, he was probably still planning to drink when he was there. It wasn't, like an alcohol free one. It was more like a spiritual journey and trying. I can't even remember what it was, but it was something to do with like this like intense spiritualness and trying to reach like almost like a new realm of yourself. That I think he was trying to unlock this something in him to allow him to get to that headspace where eventually he would,
Feel at
he
peace with himself.
yeah. And I think it's so sad. Like when I think about my dad, there was a lot of joy in his life, but before he even had kids, there was a deep sadness. His mum unfortunately died by suicide. As we were older, my uncle also died in the same way. There's always been like a realm around him of sadness, and I think he just probably from the moment he lost his own mum just deeply struggled. And through times of his life, he's had ups, but like I said, his highs were high and his lows were very, very low. So
Thank you for sharing that, Sean. I know it's really not easy, and like you've alluded to, and we've chatted before, like it's so difficult for men in particular as well to
yeah.
talk about this stuff, isn't it?
And fair play to my dad because he did talk about it. He did talk about it. I think he wanted it to be resolved without him having to give up the stuff he enjoyed.
The stuff he loved.
Yeah, like he loved a drink. He loved, like, and unfortunately, at some point, it turned from him enjoying it to it becoming something that he had to do. But I just think if he'd been able to get well without giving that up, then he would have been fine. And I can laugh about it, and I do have one of those sense of humours. I'm sure some of my mates think, "Fucking hell, Shannon, that's a bit close to the bone," but it's how I get through, and it's how my dad particularly dealt with stuff. He had a great sense of humour. There's so much joy when I think about him, but at times it's hard because my dad did cause some pain for me pre-death, after death, and he did speak about his mental health, and that was something that me and Demi had to kind of deal with as well growing up, as knowing that you've got a parent that's got mental health issues and that your parents maybe not the same as other people's parents, and people would talk about their childhoods and I would be sat there thinking, oh my God, I daren't even tell them what mine was like. I remember being on the back of my dad's motorbike before I was like even a teenager and things like that. But they were like,
The bog standard
yeah, just listen.
fitness weekend.
I think there's so many stories about it, but in general, I think listen, if you've got someone around you that's struggling with mental health, they might not be as open as my dad talking about it. I think what's difficult for me is that I knew that my dad was struggling, but there wasn't anything to help it because there was no medication that was going to help him whilst he was drinking. He'd tried therapy before, but I think because he was running away from his problems, speaking about them in particular just wasn't something he was ready to do again. He'd done it before, he didn't want to do it again. And that was kind of where he was at. And listen, there was so much support, even doctors. I spoke to a lot of doctors when he was,
You did,
in and
yeah.
out of hospitals and bits and pieces. But yeah, if somebody's not ready, they're not ready. And you can't force someone to get well. People say, oh, well, are the kids that are not enough? Are their families not enough? No, it's an illness. Someone's sick. And you treat any other sickness in a different way. I think it's particularly mental health, poor mental health is so hard for people to get their heads around. And unfortunately, unless you've struggled, similar to grief, you just don't get it.
No.
And unless you've been around somebody and you've seen that journey, it's so hard to comprehend. And I suppose grief gave me some form of insight of that deep, intense sadness. And if I had to feel that every single day of my life with the intensity that I felt it in those early days, I can't say that I would it want to be a life that I wanted to live. Like it's if you're really that deeply depressed, and no matter what you try, and I think I've said this before. I feel so sad for my dad that that's where he reached, and I think that eventually, there would have been ways to help him, but he wasn't ready for them. He knew that people loved him. He was with his brothers that day. He was with his friends that day. And this is very common where people see them, they were fine, they were smiling, they were doing all right. And then all of a sudden, the next day, they're no longer here.
Yeah.
And if we're not talking about it, and I've said this before, when people ask me, how did your dad die? And I say, suicide, people recoil from me. It's like because there's still just people really find this a difficult topic to talk about. And I get it, right? It's uncomfortable. But if we're not talking about it, and suicide's being spoke about all the time now. I got an email in work literally yesterday or the day before about suicide awareness and men's mental health and making sure that men are speaking. But no one's really talking about how we solve it.
Hmm.
And for me, that's really important because if there's no resolution, then we're just being reactive. There's no proactiveness with it. And the proactiveness is talking about how you're feeling. And me and Laura saying, I'm having a really shit day. I'm feeling really down.
And we do, don't we? We're really conscious of making sure that we share that with each other and we always get each other through. And it's, it's that cliche saying, isn't it? Like a problem shared is a problem halved. And you feel like a weight is lifted when you
Yeah.
talk to people that are willing to give you that active listening and actually want to give you a proper ear just for you to just say how you're feeling, and then
Mm.
you feel so much better for it. But thank you, Shan. I know that's so difficult for you to talk about, and like I've always said to you, I can't even comprehend what you went through. I
Yeah.
can't.
But I think it's similar for me because I remember talking to the celebrant and saying, me and my sister had both agreed that we wanted to talk about how he died at the funeral. We didn't want it to be this elephant in the room because
There's no
it's
shame.
no, and I feel no shame towards the way that my dad died. But in the same respect, I felt like I just had to come to terms that that was his choice, and if that's his choice, I have to respect that. And I didn't want to feel anger towards him. I didn't want to feel that, like, how could you do this to me? Because my dad went experience the pain after somebody has taken their own life, and yet he still felt that that was his only option. So how fucking sad is that? Like, how devastatingly sad is that? And I wanted to just kind of say, and this is where I'm reflecting to yours, Laura. I suppose for your situation, your mum would do anything to be
To be
here.
here, yeah, it's the
Whereas,
reverse, isn't it?
exactly, whereas my dad, I have to respect that that was his choice that he didn't. And that's kind of how I've dealt a lot with this grief, is saying, and this is why mine and Laura's situation is so different. Laura will sit there and think about how much her mum would enjoy, and I know that my dad, if he was here, would enjoy this. He would think this was brilliant what me and Laura were doing. Um, but he decided that he didn't want to be here anymore, and I've got to go. If that's his choice, that's his choice. As sad as it is, and as sad as it is for me, I respect his decision. So.
And Shan, I think you've alluded to it a little bit there, but I think it's important for the listeners to hear as well, in case they're feeling the same. Like, what would you say is the hardest part for you of losing dad?
Um, yeah, I think for me, I haven't just grieved him dying. I've grieved. This is so difficult to talk about, but the opportunity and the hope of reconciling our relationship. I think deep down at some point I thought he'll get there. When he's ready, he'll get there. And when he is, he'll come back to me and I'll get my dad back. Do you know what I mean?
And you were always there,
Yeah, but I
always.
think what's hard, Laura, is like, when you think, I just I wanted him to have that be well again. I wanted him to be glowing. I wanted him to enjoy life. And I think I'm grieving that for my dad. I'm grieving the conversations that we could have had. I'm grieving the fact that he's not going to be there when I get married in 2 years' time. Like, and I know he would have fucking loved to be. And that's what's hard. I think it's I had started that grief journey a little bit even before he had passed away, in the aspect that I'd had to take a step away from him, and that was so difficult for me. It literally cost me thousands of pounds in in therapy for me not to go back to that and put myself back in that situation, because I did just feel this intense, just almost like two magnets being pulled together, and him pulling one way and me kind of going after him but being repelled back in terms of
You were
our
so
relationship.
brave.
So
Like, so incredibly brave, and you were his go-to. I think that speaks volumes
yeah,
about you as a person and as a daughter. Like, your dad always saw you as his safe place.
yeah.
He did. Like, that's how I always think about it. Like,
It's a lovely way to look at it.
it was you that he always went to, so he obviously felt like he was safe with you, and I think that's an important thing for us to focus on now as well for other people. Like, this is really difficult for you to talk about, and you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position to do so.
I think it's because this is my memory of my dad, right? And I'm sure that other people will have different experiences of, for some of my dad's friends and family, they wouldn't have had as much, had as close a view to him probably in his low time. So I'm very mindful of that, because me and Demi have been very open even from the minute he passed, because it's, like I said, it's just so important for people to be talking about how they're feeling. And this is how you start the ball rolling, is
Mm.
talking about, these sort of experiences and losing people to suicide. And this, unfortunately, is one of the biggest killers. There's still no real resolution to it. So it's like, if people are aware of it, but yet it's growing every single year. Like,
Yeah,
how does
absolutely.
that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the logical part of my brain that goes,
Where's the fix? Yeah.
I don't know how we fix that. I don't, some of it's chemical imbalances, some of it's trauma. Everybody's experience of probably depression and mental health problems is different. And I think unless we talk about it more and really start digging into the psyche of people throughout their whole life, not just on that lead up, then we're not going to get to a point where, this is happening less and less. And there's less people sat here like me saying, this is my story and my dad's story, or, my partner, whoever it is.
It's so complicated, isn't it? And it's so nuanced. I think it's different for everyone, but like you say, there's always something that triggers it. There's always something that, at what point does it start? I guess, like you say, your poor dad went through so much as a young boy, and
Yeah, loads. I mean, I probably know too much about some of the stuff that went on, because me and my dad were so close. And like I said, he's always just had this kind of grey cloud, I suppose, of problems and sadness. So yeah, sad, but it's got to be spoke about. So
and thank you, Shan, for being the person to speak about it. I think just finally on that, I think it's important because you've been through it. What advice would you give to somebody right now who perhaps has a parent or a partner or a loved one who's suffering from addiction or mental health? What would you say to them right now?
I think for me, and I really am, I understand that I'm in a privileged situation to be able to afford sort of like private help, but speak to a professional, because I must have spent hundreds of hours talking to my dad about how he was feeling and what he could do. And, read this book, get back in AA, dad, do this, do that. Realistically, there was only so much I was ever going to be able to offer him, because I'm not a counselor. I'm not a professional. I don't understand, I count myself very lucky that I've never suffered with depression. So how can I fully get inside his head if I don't understand the way that it's made up? And I'd like to think I'm quite an empathetic person, but there's I don't understand chemical differences and what certain medications can or can't do. But also I feel like you really need the support. Like,
Definitely.
because sometimes if you've not had the support of a professional, you can enable some of those behaviors when you think you're helping. So yeah, there's so many charities out there, and I had the privilege to speak into some of them when I was trying to get my dad, back into rehab and get him the support. And I'm really grateful, because some of them were, reached out and was like, "Listen, I don't think your dad's ready, but do you need any help? Because this is a lot, this is a lot for one person to deal with."
Especially as a daughter as well.
Yeah, I think I just struggled to kind of leave him to his own devices. I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, yeah, professional help. I think if you can get I'll list some charities and some more information and places to kind of go and reach out if you're really struggling. Um, but speak to them, ask them how they are, make sure. I think it's spoke about all the time now. Are you okay? Or are you really okay? If you're fine, what does fine mean? Um,
Just probe a little bit more.
yeah, probe a bit more, find out a bit more, and then don't deal with it on your own, because you might be able to get so far in supporting them, but there's lots of professionals that specialize in this space. And listen, I spoke about it very openly, but therapy for me changed my life.
It really has.
Yeah, it's 100%. It's changed who I am as a person. It's changed how I think about things. It's helped me deal with grief in a very sort of raw way and address it head on. Although I'm still on that journey, I'm still got plenty of work to do. But I think as a child that's spent a lot of their life caring for their parent, I wasn't equipped to deal with it on my own. And if you've had that upbringing where maybe your parents have been a bit colourful, I suppose, in how they deal with things, then you haven't necessarily got all those skills to be able to deal with it either. So
And it affects you
yeah,
so
of
much as well when you're
course it
taking
does.
on, that level of pressure as much as you want to do anything you can to fix someone that you care and care so much about and love so deeply. There's only so much you can do and that you're equipped to
100%.
do.
So yeah, I'll put some charities and stuff down. There's lots out there in terms of places for people to speak to if you're, maybe your partner's got problems, your friends even might have an issue with drug and alcohol or mental health. So we'll list them for you to have a look at.
Thank you, Shan. Yeah, like I say, there's so much respect, and I just feel so much for everything that you went through, and yeah, I appreciate you for sharing that with the listeners.
Thank
So
you for
thank
being
you.
there with me throughout it all. Sort of, you've been
Always.
part of that journey. I think probably from when I moved up north, and maybe a year or so after we met, my dad kind of relapsed. So you've been part of, although you didn't get to meet him, you've heard,
Feel like I met him
yeah,
100 times over.
yeah, just endless love for him. Love him with every single ounce of my being. So
And it shows. So thank you so much.
thank you.
And thank you to you all for listening as well. This is a really difficult episode, and we know a lot of people continue to struggle and are struggling right now. So please let us know if there is anything that we can do to try and help. We're not experts by any means, like we say, but we can try and put you in the direction of what might help.
Probably worth, like, at some point, mental health and therapy and suicide will probably be a topic that we cover again, not specifically around my dad's story, although I will reflect on it. But I think there's a bigger conversation to be had, and I feel like I can do it some justice. So
100%.
yeah, we'll recap on it. But as always, if you've not already subscribed on YouTube, give us a follow and subscribe. So we're on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. TikTok as well, we're on, aren't we?
We are
So yeah,
getting down with the kids.
we are. You're going to see some funny content we're going to try and post as well. So
Yeah,
keep
thank you
your
so
eyes
much for
peeled.
listening.
Yeah, thank you.